So I want you to imagine a boy who read about a fantastical treasure in storybooks as a child. He would think about this treasure left by a man who had seen everything that the world had to offer. So the boy had an idea, and he created a map that laid out everywhere that he wanted to go and all the things and people that he wanted to see that man saw. This boy took the map to see the world and search for his treasure. He saw all the man's sights and started to close in on the treasure that he had seen all those years ago as a child. And now he's at the midpoint of his tale. Will he find his treasure he's been searching for? And that brings me to the topic of today's video on why manga storyboards are the blueprints of comics. Hey y'all, it's your boy Vandal, and I'm back with another video in the Making Manga series, and today we're going to be talking about the oh so amazing storyboards. But if you've not checked out the other videos in this series, I would check them up in the card right above this video. Now, let's get to the storyboards. This is the fun part of the manga making process because it's right before the step where we actually get to draw our manga. Actually draw? What do I mean? Yeah, so let's get into what the storyboard is all about. So what's a storyboard? A storyboard is basically the pre-plan to our manga. This is where you can sketch out all the ideas from your script, because the script and the storyboard are really close friends. They work very close with each other, as the storyboard is the visual translation of your script, and that's the main importance of the creation of the storyboard, the visual part. Because you know, we're making manga. But why do you even need a storyboard? Can't we just start drawing our manga right now? And while you could do that, let me tell you why you need the storyboard. Now, if you don't know me by now, pre-planning is what this manga process is all about. And this is no different. Even though this is the fun part, let's not jump the gun just yet. The storyboard is useful because it allows us to properly plan out the structure of our manga. This will help you think about the layout, think about where the panels go, think about the simple ideas for your composition and art, and where to put your dialogue and your sound effects and where everything should go. Basically, this is all about placement. It makes the process of your drawings later clearer and not so haphazard. The greatest part is that we can save time. The time saving is crucial because, like I've talked about before in my Making for Shonen Jump video that you can check out right here, when you have to go to the next phase of your process, it can take up to 15 plus hours a page. It could take more, it could take less, but the more that you plan now, the less that you'll have to think about it later. And imagine if you didn't have it, because you'd be there for like at least 2 days. Take you forever, I promise you. All right, if you made it this far in the video and you've decided you don't want to do storyboards, I'm gonna give you a chance to click off in 3, 2, 1. Oh, look at you. You actually made the right choice. You decided that you didn't want to waste your time and you want to know how to make the all magical storyboard. All right. I got you. I just got one word where we're going to start. Panels. But before we get into that boring stuff, let's get into this fun and interesting stuff over here. So you're probably wondering where you should create this almighty tool for the manga making gods. Well, honestly, you only have about 3 choices. You have paper and pencil, you got your computer, or you got a chisel and stone. Literally, your only options are chisel and stone. Could you imagine if that was true? But seriously, just make it in a place that you're comfortable with and have easy access to. I recommend personally paper and pencil approach, more so because it's easy and it's accessible to work with, but feel free to use whatever you want. And I see you over there reaching for that hammer. Stop it. Speaking of hammers, if you guys are still enjoying the video up to this point, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and share the video and hit that bell for notifications when you want to hear things that I have to say. But let's get back into the storyboarding. Alright, now we have our tools. Make sure you have your script or all of this is pointless. So now we can start the process, and everything in this process will live and die with the panel. Now panels by themselves are just simply an individual frame, but panels become a comic when we add more frames to a page, and then through that process, sequential storytelling is born. Boom! Bet you they didn't teach you that in manga school. Wait, there isn't manga school. Oh, okay. So, I know I just blew your mind, but keep up with me. So some panels come in various sizes, and we'll talk about that later, but the most important part about this is the layout of these panels. So I've read a lot of manga and I've read a lot of amateur manga, and from time to time in the amateur manga I see panels organized in a way that don't understand layout. Now don't get me wrong, art can be whatever you want, but you need to understand the rules of the game before you can break it. And the first part of your layout that will dictate everything is the direction your reader will be reading for your comic or your manga. Will they be reading left to right, right to left, up to down, or even, stay with me here, the fourth way? I know, which I really think might be the fourth dimension of comic reading, but my theory is still kind of in its beta phase, so let's get back to what we actually know. So now, excluding the fourth dimension, we need to pick that direction that we're going to choose for our reader to read. Now that we have our choice down, we can move on to more of the parts where we actually get to look at the script. Okay, so the script. If you're confused and don't have it yet, go look at the script creation video right here. But now we're gonna have our script in one hand and we're gonna have our drawing in the other hand. Yes, we're like Yagami. We need to start our translation. If your notes of your script are good and descriptive, then we can start out the paneling of our page. The issue some people might have now is they're not sure what size panel or what kind of panel you should use, where and when, but don't worry, I got you, that's why you're here. Now, when you think of the panel size and shape, it is more akin to a camera frame, and the size of the panel, you can imagine it in terms of importance to your story and what you want to show. With the many panels you'll use, the more it becomes apparent that this is a game of Tetris and you're trying to make sure things fit how you want and where you want them to go. Now, I think a good rule of thumb is that the size of your panel will be where you have the most important visual information. Now, what you want to put in your panel is up to you, but there are very conventional ways to approach paneling using film shots for your panel's contents, like establishing shots that show where your characters are in the setting, close-up shots to really show those emotional moments and certain facial expressions, and even POV, which might not be used as much, but sometimes you get to see what the character sees and it adds to the immersion of their feelings in the moment and imparts those onto the reader. There are more types, but they will change as you create different panels to show those shots. I would recommend almost always using a rectangle or a square for your manga or comic. I'll talk about this later when you're creating unique frames, which needs to be done with a purpose and sparingly to have a bigger impact for your readers. We'll talk about that later. Now, where should we lay our panels? I would always start at the top, and depending on your reading direction, whether it's on the left or the right, you can decide where to go. Then after that, we need to make our way down in the way of a Z, like, you know, Dragon Ball Z. No, I'm just kidding. Till we get to the end of the page. Getting the hang of what you need to put where is going to need two things. One, you will need to read and study other mangas and comics and see how their paneling is done to get a feel for what you actually want when you start paneling. And then two, how do they use them to tell a story, and when do they do and do they don't? When they don't, break the rules. Now, the next part we're going to talk about is actually creating the storyboard. Storyboards, again, are very rough sketches of your manga. Now, if you see what I've drawn on the screen, it's going to look very different from what I did initially to what actually came out at the end. Although you're making this out to plan out your whole roadmap, know that things will change and that's okay. But having some idea now is way better than having no idea later. So now, start sketching out your panels. First, read what you've written in your script and then imagine what it looks like in a sequence of shots and draw them out. It's as simple as that, but it is also very difficult. However, there are some things I want to talk to you about to help improve this practice. We talked about those different types of camera shots earlier, and a good rule of thumb is to vary up your shots. We don't need 10 establishing shots or pages of close-ups with nothing but heavy dialogue. What you want to do is keep your reader interested in what's happening in each panel. So as you go through, ask yourself, am I using too much of one shot? How can I vary this up and make it different and also still make it flow well? Flow. This is what we talked about briefly in the scripting portion of how to create manga scripts. Flow in comics is how the panels go into one another. This is mainly about continuity and composition. Continuity in the sense about what happened in the last panel and how does that follow into what happens in the next. And in terms of composition, we're thinking about how interesting it is for the viewer, and also clarity, meaning that is it too complex? Is it easy to understand? Or are there too many things going on inside of each of my panels and my reader doesn't understand what's going on? Let's look at these 3 C's a little bit more and break them down to understand better what I mean. And I'm going to use note as an example for some of these ideas. Continuity is basically how your panels transition from one to the next, making sure that what happens in the last scene matches kind of close to what's happening in the next scene of your panel. If your character walks, for example, into a room, having them instantly fight a villain in the next panel is a bit disjointed and can be jarring for your reader. Instead, once they walk in, have them sit down, or we can see possibly another angle of them coming into the room. And then we can progress to this villain fight. We should be very thoughtful about how we transition to the next panel. There are 2 things we need to work on to get continuity right. We need our script, and we need to really work through the scene and imagine the order of events. That's the first thing we gotta do. Second, we have to key into the important parts that are written in our script. It's kind of like the acting we talked about on the video about scripts. To really understand what I mean about continuity, let's take a look at one of the pages from Note. Alright, so to preface this is a manga that is being read from right to left. So we're going to start in the first panel where we see our character Caesar, and he is staring at the door in a hallway that he has just entered. He goes in the next panel to try and open up the door, and then in the third panel we are brought into this huge room where he is to see the fortune teller. As we can see in the fortune teller's room, there's the fortune teller and there's also a chair. He goes to sit down, he tries to get her attention, he notices that there's a tip jar and he puts money inside of the tip jar. I think this page is perfect when we're talking about continuity, but I don't want to toot my own horn. I really think it follows a lot of the rules that I talked about previously. It follows the Z motion, pays close attention to small details within each scene linking into the next scene. I think it's very important overall in thinking about how the shots flow into each other as well. Nothing feels disjointed. He doesn't just open the door and then magically he's in the room. We feel like some sense of him going into the space and the space opening up as the frame gets tighter, but I could talk about that in a whole nother video about how to format your panels, and that actually perfectly melds into talking about composition next. And with composition, it's important because in each panel we are thinking about framing everything. What I want you to do is I want you to think about each panel as a camera and how it's positioned looking at your character and capturing all the things that it can see within that beautiful rectangle or square bound. With composition, what angles are we using? What are we putting inside of the panel or the frame? From what angle and how? This is very important. How are we putting it and how are we arranging our characters and background to evoke feelings in the reader to elevate what we are trying to convey in our story? This is really important. The next part of our composition, aside from the art, is how our word bubbles or our sound effects frame inside of the panel. It's something that you can think of as an afterthought, but if you think of it here, it'll be a lot easier to think about. I don't want to miss covering my art, or this is coming in the way. Once you have that planned now, it'll be a lot easier later because you already expected where the word bubbles should go. Very important tip that I think everyone should know. Now, do we need to panel break, or how does the placement of our pieces create flow in our comic? These are things that we need to just be constantly thinking about. So in composition, you want to make sure that you're placing your characters and everything in an eye-pleasing way for, well, the person who's going to read your manga or comic. Think about placement, y'all. Let's talk a little bit about this one page from Note that I think is a good example of composition and how shot framing can be used to evoke certain emotions and why different angles need to be used to vary up your shots to keep them interesting and keep your reader wanting to read a little bit more. An example I'm going to use is from a page in Note right in the middle of the train scene when the villain enters. The composition here starts off strong as the doors open because in the last page we suddenly saw the train stop for whatever reason. This begins to create that feeling of unease which is made by and carried on from the last page, which is added by the train doors in the first panels being slanted and not head on. And the sharp ding sound that's created with the sound effects used alerts our characters to something that's about to happen. Now, when we look at the next panel, the camera is angled downward, showing our heroes terrified at what they're seeing as the speed lines add weight to the situation and tension that was created previously. Now, the sound effects kick in, bringing us down to see what this horror is they saw, and it is the man they tried to evade earlier who's walking into the train. To add to his entrance, I placed the camera at a downward angle to give the reader the feeling that our heroes are ants and are about to be stepped on by this menacing threat. The villain also takes up a relatively huge space on the page, so even though Caesar and him are ready to fight, Caesar seems small in comparison. We also get a few close-ups as some important info is told to Caesar right before we need to turn the page. The panels here are small, which helps to speed up the things that are going on in the scene and making you want to be interested in what's happening in the next page. So again, think about the angle of your shots and the way you place your characters within those panels to make excellent composition and intriguing use of angles to keep the reader interested. Clarity now, I think, is important to have in our manga or we're not able to read it. I know we all want to fit everything we can into one panel or even one page, but the problem is that one, not everything can go on one page, and two, less is always more. It sucks to have to work on more pages or be limited by them, but we need to work with what we're given sometimes. So in this case, I think that less can be more. The more clear and succinct you are with your pages and panels, the easier ideas and dialogue will be transmitted to the reader. Think of it like just beaming your thoughts to your reader. Because when you pack so much information into a page, albeit being a great for your story, it can overwhelm your reader and bog down the flow as they want to know more, but it's better to spread what you want in your panels and your dialogues over a few pages than rather cramming it all into one. This is a really difficult balancing act that we all have to learn as we become better mangaka. But think about the information overload and how to make that a bit more simpler to the reader, as you can cut down on some things and maybe even take some things out that aren't actually important. That also plays into your composition. Putting too much artwork is another thing that can mess up your clarity, because it can make something hard to see what's going on and can be hard to be as intentional as you should be with your art in directing your viewer's eye to something that they should see or something that they should understand. Clarity would be so simple if we could just put one panel and everything could be understood in there. But that's why we have sequential storytelling, because what we want to do is not put just one panel on one page. We want to show a series of images together, and that's why clarity is important, so we can put those in a way that everyone can understand. Another point that I didn't talk about in clarity is that clarity to you and clarity to the reader are two different things. What you understand to make sense might not make sense to someone who's reading it. Again, I talked about this in another video, but having beta readers or having someone look over your storyboard would be just as important at this point, because sometimes you need an extra eye, because some things that are clear to you are not clear to everyone else. Don't forget that. Okay, now so we've broken down the 3 C's your storyboard needs to achieve flow, and that's continuity, composition, and clarity. And with some fine tuning, it would create amazing flow for your manga. Now remember, flow is how pages are read from the beginning to the end of a page. You'll know the flow of your storyboard is good when you're able to feel that you're smoothly reading through the pages and you're not too bogged down by reading chunks of dialogue or trying to understand what is happening visually within the story. Even though it's a storyboard, think about creating flow here, because in later iterations of your process, you will change parts of your structure, but creating a strong foundation now will help you later on. In flow, one of the things that I talked about earlier was non-conventional panels. The use of these panels and panel types can break flow, but if used right, it can enhance that feeling you want to give the reader. So special pages and panels have to have a little bit of logic that follows your page structure and makes sense why you formatted it differently from that Z format that we talked about earlier of reading. And another thing is, it needs to be used sparingly. Now, I'm not going to tell you how many times you need to use it or how many times you should use it, but if your whole manga is special panels, Well, it's not really special, it's just non-conventional and possibly hard to read and understand, and obviously lacks clarity for the reasons we've talked about before. So on the screen right now, I'm showing a few of these non-conventional panel pages. I picked two off of the internet, and one is from My Hero and one is from another series that I'm not too sure about, but they both explore those ideas of non-conventional panel pages and how they work throughout your manga or comic and how they can look a little bit different from your average page. I don't want to make this too long, but one of the ones that really stands out to me is the My Hero page panel, as we can see that Overhaul is reaching his hand out and that's framing other panels within his hand finger, showing what's going on and arcing our way going back up to seeing what he's trying to reach out for. It's really interesting just seeing how that's used as a paneling device, but also an artistic work. You can see where the line can blur between the two. And that's the perfect segue to go into spreads. So this page right here that we're looking at is a spread, and I would say that spreads are super important because they're the more impactful part of the presentation of your story. These exist because this is not something that just one page can hold. It's something that's extremely dynamic that you can use to display action, but also using it to move the story along in a creative way. I think the perfect juxtaposition is between the two spreads that I created for Note. Now, if we look at them side by side, they both serve different purposes and they're both very impactful because there's a lot going on. In one panel, we have Caesar talking to the fortune teller to understand his fate, and we see how it's spread over 2 pages, an arcing story guiding our eye as we look at them from a bottom angled position. But then we have the more dynamic, more impactful one, which is like the hyper climax to the story, where we see Inyaniso coming down with a huge fist trying to kill the Pig King. It's one of those things that you have to choose and pick how you use that dynamic effect of the 2 pages to relay the information that you want the reader to take in, because 2 pages is a lot to use for just one set of information. So how you structure that is also definitely really important. But basically what you want to do with those 2 pages is it's a dynamic use of the representation in an impactful way to tell your story in a way that 1 page just can't. Now for some of the technical stuff about actually creating the storyboard. Now it can be paper, it can be digital, it's really honestly up to you. I prefer physical on paper because one thing about your storyboard is that you want to draw small thumbnail sketches. The thumbnail sketches are just small sketches and nothing using hyper detail. And this is a big reason why I say you should do physical over doing digital, and this is because of the details. One thing I find artists that we all have in common is that we can get stuck in the details. If you're just a writer-artist combo, you don't have to worry too much about this point. But artists, if you have to focus on the speed, you won't get caught up in the digital details, as this is something that you can get lost in using digital, where you want to redraw something, you want to keep drawing it, you want to add a few more details. All those little things take up a little bit more time than they really need to. This part of your process needs to be very intentional, but also needs to be quick because we don't want to spend too much time here. We have a lot of energy to use in the next section of our creative process. So the next part in our process where we can actually make all of those changes and add things that we didn't get to add previously, and then we can get more stuck in those details, but I'll get to that in the next video. Well, the next video. Now here are some small notes to keep in mind that I don't want you to forget about while you're in your storyboard phase. Don't forget to number your pages just to be able to have a reference and keep everything organized. Also, there's something that's happened to me where I've noticed that the script might need a little bit more space than I thought, so I add extra pages or extra panels, and this is where the first revision might happen in your storyboard. So you might want to have the page numbers there so you don't get too lost, or you can figure out where things happen, and you can also make those corrective measures inside of your script so you know that this page is now starting here and this page ends there. It'll definitely help you with your storyboard and not getting lost with a lot of things as you go throughout the storyboarding process. So another thing that you might be trying to do during your storyboard that we talked about is speed, and you might be trying to speed through your art, and there might be some things that you might forget or you want to correct later, and the easiest way to get through this without having to make a lot of corrections to your art is to make notes within the margins of your panel or whatever you want to change later, putting tiny little notes later that are legible. Don't forget your handwriting, people. That are legible will help you remember what you wanted to do later or what you wanted to change or some things that might need to be changed later. A small detail to think about, but it'll help your process later because it'll cut down on you thinking about what did I want on this page? Did I really want that? And you'll have it written right there. So writing little notes here and there will help you. This is the fun part about storyboarding and not thinking too much about the details again. Just thinking about what you want, where you want it, and how you want it, and get in and get out as quick as you can. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention earlier was about the structure of the page, but in the layout we want to be cognizant of something called the gutter, and what you're seeing on the screen here is what the gutter is, and the gutter is where everything can get lost, and this is the area that is towards the spine of your book. So this is more important if you're somebody who wants to make a physical copy, but you want to make sure that your important dialogue or images of your panels you want aren't in this section, because in this section everything will get lost. And that is the same rule that applies to spread pages as well, because when you're looking at your spread page you want to make sure that the most important information is seen, and some will get lost. It's inevitable with spread pages, but try your best to keep all of your important information away from that section of your storyboard. All in all, these are my most simple tips for making a storyboard, and again, feel free to do it however you want. This is art, blah blah blah. But what I'd like you to do is take a pic of how your storyboard came out, put it in the comments. I want to see what you guys make and what your storyboard looks like, all that good stuff. Put that in the comment section below. I'd love to see it. I like to use printer paper, keep my paper horizontal with a little crease in the middle to denote 2 pages, you know, trying to economize, save the earth. Now, depending on your reading orientation, I'll have the staples to the left or the right of my storyboard. Then I would implement all the steps that we outlined before to fill everything in that beautiful storyboard, and then we would finish this huge step in our manga making process. Now we can move on to actually making the manga, but in the next video, I want to do a huge in-depth guide on making manga inside of Clip Studio and potentially giving a free copy away. So you can use what you've learned in this video and the ones previously and the ones that are going to come after that. But if you want to be here for that really in-depth video tutorial, subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can get one step closer to finishing our manga. But now we have an actual guide map. But yeah guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video and it gave you more ideas on a nice process on how to make your storyboard for your manga. If you can think about anything that I missed or you wanted me to expand on, you can put that also in the comment section down below along with your storyboards once they're done. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video for more, and hit that bell for notifications when you want to hear things that I have to say. But yeah guys, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Get it? One Piece? No? Alright, anyways, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace! Bye!